So I did another little poll this week. It didn't get nearly as much traction as the one last week, but I still appreciate everybody who contributed in it. And if you'd like to leave a comment, you can tell me and Jordan what you think Tennessee's biggest trap game is this year on the schedule. Now, trap games are a very subjective matter. Some people don't believe they exist. Some people think that it's just a game that you didn't expect to be difficult that has suddenly become difficult on the schedule. Other people think it's a game that is before a big game that you're just looking ahead of. So this is an entirely subjective matter that we're dealing in right now. So we may disagree pretty sharply on what we consider a trap game on the schedule for Tennessee this year. But I want to go ahead and get to the poll that you guys answered to in sometime last week. I forget when exactly, but 4 of you said Oklahoma would be Tennessee's biggest trap game of the season. And I'm assuming those of you who said that are the same ones that I mentioned that second definition, a game that you just didn't think would be difficult becomes difficult. And that is right, honestly. But you look at where that game falls in the schedule, it is the last before Tennessee's second bye of the year. So by that definition, it may not be a trap game. And again, there is a lot of season between now and then. But I do think Oklahoma will be considerably better this year than last.
I will say that Oklahoma played surprisingly better than I think a lot of people would have thought last season against Tennessee. I mean, ultimately, Tennessee got the victory. I think it was by about 10 points or so.
Yeah, Tennessee really controlled that game. Oklahoma just had to try and find a way back in it. They were clawing back there late.
Yeah, but you never know watching these Tennessee games whenever a team can get hot there towards the end. But yeah, I mean, Oklahoma and everything, I think with the bye weeks and stuff, maybe it doesn't jump out as like a trap game. But I mean, like you got to think that Oklahoma too, they have all that history of Josh Heupel, and I feel like that was part of the headlines last season. But I mean, they're going to want to win, especially after Tennessee came into their home stadium last year and won. With it being Knoxville, it'll be interesting. I mean, of course, Tennessee will have the home field advantage and everything, and Neyland is not a fun place for opposing teams to go into. But Oklahoma's revamped a little bit in the offseason. They got John Mateer, I think from Washington State, and I was looking up his stats earlier today, and I'm pulling them up now. 3,100 yards passing, and then 29 touchdowns and 7 interceptions. So that's something that Oklahoma struggled with a little bit last season. In 2024, their leading passer was Jackson Arnold. And he only had 1,412 touchdowns. And their offense wasn't really that great. I mean, their leading rusher had less than 600 yards. So, but getting a good quarterback in the offseason and everything, I feel like Oklahoma could be more underrated than people would think. And you can never overlook Brent Venables either as a defensive mind. So I'm sure that he is taking notes a lot from last year's game, and I'm sure that he'll be even more prepared coming into Knoxville this season.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. But and I'll say too, with the offensive situation they had last year at Oklahoma, it was shockingly bad how they just had no luck with injuries whatsoever. They had 5 or 6 guys last year that were playing wide receiver that were out at least at some point over the course of the season, a couple of which missed pretty much the entire rest of the season after the first 2 or 3 games, which I think hindered them a lot. And with Mateer, he's definitely on paper a better quarterback than what you saw with Jackson Arnold. And they've brought in other pieces too. I know there's at least one receiver that they've got this year that should be better than what they had last. And Jaden Ott at running back, who was a proven commodity when he was at Cal. It's just a matter of how those guys will do against better competition, I think, because Mateer, he came out and balled out against Mountain West teams last year because, the Pac-2 is no longer attached to the traditional 12 teams in the Pac-12 conference now, and it's basically just its own hybrid between a group of 5 and Power 4 conference. I guess now they're calling it Group of 6 because the Pac-12 is no longer considered Power 5 or Power 4. Realignment is messy. Bottom line from everything I just said there. But I think people are right to suspect that is a trap game on the schedule. So I had 4 votes for Oklahoma just in the poll. 2 of you said Syracuse would be a trap game. And it's the first game of the season. It's your biggest opponent. So I don't know if that's truly a trap game. Maybe they're a little better than you think. It's one of those games Tennessee has not a lot to gain from and everything to lose in, I feel like. A lot like NC State last year. A team that you don't really benefit from beating up on, and then if you lose to them, well, guess what? You're probably winning 6 or 7 games at the very most, just because that shuts a lot of doors for you over the course of the season.
Yeah, and that could be a good game to find out answers. I mean, it's first game of the year. Get a little bit of an idea to see how Tennessee will end up faring. Syracuse is a little concerning to me as well, mainly considering how they were on offense last season. I know Kyle McCord's gone. He was leading in like passing and touchdowns. And
he also had a 5 interception game against Pittsburgh last year, so
yeah,
he was liable for some duds of performances. But overall, Fran Brown was right to give Ryan Day the bottles of champagne.
100%, 100%. The one thing that does concern me about Syracuse, though, is just how much they like to throw the ball downfield. And with so much uncertainty with Tennessee's like losing 4 safeties, losing these defensive backs across the board. I mean, they were throwing the ball deep a lot with Syracuse. And I think that there was, I think Kyle McCord had like 2 games where he had over 60 attempts, maybe. And then I saw him on the Gruden quarterback thing, and I think he said he had 40 attempts before even halftime at one point. So this is a team that likes to throw the football, and they can run the football a little bit too, or at least statistically speaking, because their leading rusher, he had 1,000 yards, but he also had 16 touchdowns. Now, I don't know how much that had to do with them being such a pass-heavy offense or not, but Syracuse, I wouldn't overlook them if I was Tennessee. And plus, with it being a neutral site game too, I mean, you never know. You never know.
I don't think Tennessee will overlook it just because that's a game that your first game of the season. So you shouldn't be overlooking it. And that's honestly more of a home game for Tennessee, I feel like, than a road game just because of geography. I don't know who their quarterback is going to be at Syracuse this year. I know they got Steve Angeli, who Tennessee initially wanted to hype up in the transfer portal. They do have one pretty nice running back in Yassine Willis, who is kind of one of your bigger bruiser running backs, goes about 6'1", 230. And then you got a couple other guys too that out of the portal, and then just recruiting at wide receiver right now. It sounds like they're doing some good things there. I know they did lose Trevor Pena to Penn State, I believe, a couple weeks back, but it sounds like they've got plenty of other guys coming in. So looking at ESPN right now, Tennessee is favored by 10.5 in that game. Of course, we still have a long way to go between now and then, but that's where it stands right now with Syracuse. So again, 2 of you mentioned Syracuse as Tennessee's biggest trap game of the season. And then I got a couple other like 1 votes in here. First one that I got was Arkansas, which when you look at the schedule, that does seem like a trap game just with the fact that it is situated after a bye week and before Alabama. So that is your typical look-ahead game. But the thing is, this is one of the 2 teams that beat you or 3 teams that beat you last season, 2 in the regular season, I should say. You should have no problem being motivated to play that game. That's my only argument with that. But by definition, if you're going off of a game that falls before a big game, then yes, that could be considered a trap game.
Yeah, I mean, on paper, it 100% looks like a trap game. Don't get me wrong, but like as you mentioned, I mean, Tennessee has so much fuel to the fire with losing to Arkansas last year that I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if Tennessee gets up a little bit that they would just start running it up a little bit against Arkansas based on what happened last season. I didn't really think of Arkansas on my list of trap games, but it's mainly because of that reason. It's because I don't see Tennessee losing to Arkansas in back-to-back years, especially maybe they overlooked them last year, maybe not. I'm not sure. I wasn't in the locker room, but I will say they know what Arkansas has to offer based on last year's result. So I think Tennessee will come really prepared for that game. I don't see Tennessee struggling as much against Arkansas.
And I would say that was also situated in the typical look ahead spot because it's after a bye week and right before Florida, who Tennessee, despite losing to quite often, should be motivated to play against. So yeah, that one definitely sat there. But we've also seen Tennessee win in those situations too, like LSU in 2022. Now there were some other factors that really helped Tennessee out, like the 11 a.m. kickoff. That's a win before the game even starts in Baton Rouge. So that obviously helped out a great deal. But yeah, that again makes sense for a trap game, but they should be motivated, I would say. And then I got a couple more submissions here. Uh, this one, I know who this one is from. Shout out if you're listening, you know who you are. Motivated Mark Stoops at Kentucky. Now, honestly, with where it is situated, it's before Oklahoma, which Oklahoma is the last game before a bye, and it could be a big game with where it is. It just in the season and how Oklahoma does to start the season. It could be considered a trap game, especially if you beat Alabama down there and you're potentially hungover because that would be your first game after Alabama should you get it done. But if you lose to Alabama, I don't think that's the case. Now, again, this is Tennessee we're talking about. The
Yeah.
Tennessee does not fear Kentucky, but you cannot lose to Kentucky. So therefore, it's never a fun experience if you're a Tennessee fan.
Yeah, Kentucky is always an interesting one because it's one that you expect to win, but if you do lose to Kentucky, that stings a lot. But Tennessee has fared phenomenally against Kentucky historically. I think it was 2019. I think Kentucky was ranked near the top 10. They may have been 11. I think they were number 10 in the country or something like that. And Tennessee had like the goal. I think that was the game at the goal line stand. And
Yeah.
Daryl Taylor had like 4 sacks. So even Kentucky's best, that was probably Kentucky's best team.
I don't know about that. There were some other ones, the 18 and the 21 season, the Levis season up there when Tennessee won that game. That team won 9 and I think like a Citrus Bowl that year against Iowa. And then in 18, when they were down here, they won 9 and I think also a Citrus Bowl against Penn State. That was the Terry Wilson. I guess he's Josh Hines Allen. He's no longer Josh Allen. Benny Snell was on that team. Tennessee won that game by 17.
Yeah, I mean,
So
all
like their
these.
best teams ever have not done well against Tennessee.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, they haven't fared well against Tennessee since Bear Bryant was their coach. So I don't know. I'm not too concerned about Kentucky just because I feel like there is sometimes mental blocks with certain teams. I feel like Kentucky's mental block is Tennessee. They can't seem to overcome that hurdle. But to play devil's advocate, that's how Tennessee's been with Florida in like recent
Yeah.
years. Like we've
Oh,
talked about
absolutely.
Florida just throwing in whoever. Like it doesn't matter if they're playing 2 tight ends at quarterback, which they've done, and still beat Tennessee. It doesn't matter. Sometimes there's just some kind of voodoo in the air that keeps teams from winning. And I just don't see Tennessee losing to Kentucky, to be honest.
Uh, 3 more submissions here. And spoiler alert, 2 of them, well, one of them is no trap games, and the other one is every game. So that's just two extremes right there that what we're throwing out there. Don't trust anyone is what one of those is saying. And then the trap games, I think the direct comment was just like, that's some BS narrative that media likes to put out that trap games exist. So maybe they mean nothing to you, and that's okay. That's okay. I'm not judging anybody. And then the other vote is for Florida. And I'll be honest, I don't agree with this one. I really don't. Because Florida, you expect that one to be difficult. Because again, I told you guys earlier, I was on that Florida show last night. I truly think that just on paper right now, with the fact that Florida at least has a proven quarterback, that is probably Tennessee's toughest game at the moment. I just look around. Georgia at home. Look, I know that Kirby Smart's going to have a good team. I'm not at all saying Tennessee will win that game. I also don't trust Gunnar Stockton. We don't know what Alabama's got at quarterback with Ty Simpson. He may be really good this year, but still very unproven, largely unproven. John Mateer at Oklahoma, proven in a lower level of competition. How will he translate to SEC play? DJ Lagway has SEC experience and got a lot better once he was the primary guy after the Tennessee game last season. And you look at that stretch of games there to end the season, because it is the second to last game. It's just 3 games. You have the bye week, and then New Mexico State is your first game out of the bye week. Imagine if that's a trap game before Florida. You're looking ahead there. Wait, Austin Peay 2 years ago?
Yeah.
That may have been a look-ahead game. Maybe they took Florida for granted in the swamp. That also could have been a trap game, potentially. Florida was definitely not better than Tennessee that year for a lot of the season. But after Florida, you have Vanderbilt. Surely Tennessee is not looking past Florida for Vanderbilt. I just can't imagine a world in which that's the case. So by definition, I don't think that's a trap game. I just think that's a difficult game.
Yeah, I would agree too. I mean, when I was like coming up with my notes on the trap games and stuff, I was thinking about Florida. Like, I think it's going to be a really tough game. I don't know by definition if it is a trap game, but playing in Gainesville, especially late in the season, and everything with playoff hopes on the line, everything, it's going to be difficult. And Lagway, I know his stats aren't insane out there. I mean, he did have a little bit of injuries and stuff, but I mean, he is a very talented quarterback, and he can complete a pass deep whenever. I mean, all it takes is one bad mistake and you got a touchdown right there with him. So, and not to mention all the athletes that Florida pull in, like we were mentioned a little bit earlier with the recruits coming out of the South Florida area and everything. Like, Florida's always a difficult team to begin with, regardless of how their record is. It doesn't matter if they have 2 games that they've won the entire year. It doesn't matter if they've had 10 games. Florida's going to play Tennessee as hard as they can. And I would agree with you that it's probably going to be Tennessee's most difficult game of the year, just based on what we know now. Like, of course, we'll find out more as the season goes on, but there's question marks with Alabama. There's question marks with Georgia. Florida, they turned things around big time last year. And on top of that, they had arguably the hardest schedule in college football, or at least heading into the season. And this year, they're going to have another difficult schedule. But Florida overperformed, I would say, significantly based on what we thought going into the 2024 season. And I only imagine that Florida is going to take a bigger step this year too. So I think it's a very concerning game for Tennessee. I don't know if it's by definition a trap game, but Tennessee, if they can beat Florida, then I think that's going to say a lot about the team.
Yeah, and we were talking about this last night on the Florida show that I was on, the Florida Gators Live here on the Voice of College Football Network. With that game being later in the season, maybe it helps Tennessee. Maybe Tennessee is a little bit more sure of itself by that point in the season than it is in years past, when it's going down there like the third week of the year and they're still trying to discover themselves. And Florida at least appears to have things figured out and catches Tennessee and wins it by a couple touchdowns. So maybe that's a difference. But again, Florida usually in those years has fallen off after it's beaten Tennessee. Tennessee beat Florida last year. Florida got better as the year went on, which is something we're not accustomed to seeing. So a couple different things that we are traditionally used to seeing in that rivalry are not going according to plan. But I will say this: if college football playoff hopes are on the line in Gainesville, that changes things
Yeah.
significantly for Tennessee, and I would argue probably for the worse.
Yeah, because you would imagine that those fans are going to show up and show out, especially even if Florida doesn't have a chance to go in the playoffs, which I think they very well do going into the season. But even if they don't, even if they lose a couple of games before playing against Tennessee, those fans will be more than happy to show out, um, just for the sake of ruining Tennessee's what they have going and keeping them out of the playoffs. They're going to be very motivated. But I will say there are two positives to take away from the situation for Tennessee fans. One, since it's later in the year, you're not going to have to deal with that Florida heat. And from what I've heard about the swamp is they designed it specifically for the sun to beat down on the opposing team's sideline and everything while they're sitting there in the shade. So they've always had that unfair advantage and they're used to it too, practicing there all the time. So it'll be a little bit cooler with it being later in the year. But and also too, there'll be more film. I mean, Tennessee oftentimes, I mean, years past, Tennessee is usually playing the third week of September, still kind of early in the year and everything, still trying to figure things out. Tennessee playing them later on, they're going to have a lot more film to work with. They're going to have a better understanding of what Florida is capable of. And hopefully Tennessee can make the right adjustments to where they can beat the Gators, but it's going to be a difficult game for sure. And I wouldn't be surprised if it would be, depending on how good the teams are, could see College Game Day there or something like that too. Like it's going to
Yeah.
be a big event.
And looking at Florida this year, that schedule is very difficult. They've got return trips to LSU, Ole Miss, and Texas A&M. They get Texas at home. They're at Miami, who I do think will take a considerable step back this year. And then they're at Kentucky as their other road game, which I don't see being too much of a challenge just on paper. So they will have their work cut out for them on the road, but I'm sure if Tennessee somehow finds itself in a college football playoff situation, which I don't necessarily think is a possibility right now, that I think could be a pretty difficult challenge for Tennessee should it occur.